This is a Blender tutorial for complete beginners. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to model this bottle of pills from scratch. By the end of this video, you will know how to create any simple bottle like this one, and you will be able to use this model later to make some animations for your clients and make some money with Blender. If you want to learn more about modeling and texturing in Blender, I put everything that I've gathered over the last 10 years into my Blender ebook, so check that out, the link is below. First of all, I'm going to quickly familiarize you with the interface that you're looking at right now, just in case this is your first time ever opening Blender. And if anything I explain is going to be too fast for you, you can always roll back the video a couple of seconds. You can always drop a question in the comment section, or you can join our massive Discord community where we got over 3,500 people of all skill levels. You can always pop in there and ask a question and ask for some guidance. You're going to learn a lot by just being around other people who do 3D modeling. But here's a very quick and basic overview. By default, Blender is split into 4 windows, and each of those windows is used for a different purpose. Right here we got the 3D viewport where we can see our scene, we can see our model. This is where we're going to do most of the work. Over here on the side we got the properties panel, and this is where you can just control a bunch of properties and add a bunch of different tools. We're mostly going to be focusing on these 2 windows. Then you have your outliner up here, which is basically just a list of all the different things that you have in your scene. We're not really going to use this, so you can ignore this window for the most part in this tutorial. Down here we have the timeline, which is meant for animations, and again we're not going to be creating animations in this tutorial, so we're also not going to use this window. You can hover your mouse over the black line between 2 windows, such as this one over here, and once you get to 2 arrows you can just click and drag to collapse this window. You can also lift this one up a little bit to get this out of the way so that we have some more space for this one, which is more important. Any shortcuts or commands that I'm going to use in this tutorial, you're going to be able to see them over here. For example, if I press shift or if I press control, you can see that I'm pressing that button right here. This is just to help you understand what I'm doing. I would recommend you take some notes of some shortcuts that I'm going to tell you in this video. Now that you got a very basic idea of what you're looking at, let me give you some of the most fundamental controls that you're going to need all the time, just to make you a little bit more comfortable with working in Blender. First of all, if your mouse is anywhere over the 3D viewport, it's no surprise that you can scroll up or scroll down to zoom in or to zoom out of your scene. If you have a number pad, you can also use plus and minus on the number pad to zoom in incrementally. Now, if you click and drag the middle mouse button, you're going to spin your view around the scene, and this is one of the most important controls for your 3D viewport. Obviously, as you're modeling, you're going to have to be able to see the object from many different perspectives, and you're going to be changing this all the time. Additionally, if you hold shift and then you click and drag the middle mouse button, you're going to be able to pan your view. So for example, you can shift your view to the left side, and now you're looking at a different area. So now when you rotate your view with the middle click, it's going to spin around that area. If you want to go back to looking at your default cube, again just hold down shift, then click and drag the middle mouse button and just move to the right side, and now you're looking at the cube and you're spinning around the cube again. This is less important, but I'll just throw it in there while I'm at it. If you hold down control, you can again click and drag the middle mouse button, and now when you move your mouse up and down, you're going to zoom in or zoom out in a very smooth manner. I recommend you spend a couple minutes just playing around with these commands that I just showed you, just so that they start entering your muscle memory. This is going to become kind of like walking for you. You don't think about how you do it. In fact, if you ask me when I'm away from the keyboard what these shortcuts are, I probably can't even tell you because I don't even look at the keyboard. I just go by muscle memory. Now that we got the basic view controls out of the way, let me show you some basic controls for interacting with the object in your scene, such as this default cube. Now, before we can do anything with this cube right here, we're going to have to select it, and depending on the settings which you chose when you were setting up Blender, your selection is going to be either left click or right click. For me it's right click, but for you it might be left click. So if for you it's left click, just remember anytime I tell you to use right click for selecting something, you're just going to replace right with left. But if you want to change this because you're not comfortable with using your current mouse button, here's how you can do that. Go up here to edit in the top left corner, open up preferences, and this is your control panel for Blender where you can change all sorts of settings. Anything from your shortcuts to the colors of your background. You can even install add-ons. You can do anything in this little window. You're going to find this section called key map right here, and in the top of this menu here you're going to find left or right. This is how you can choose which mouse button is going to select objects. Just choose whatever you like. It doesn't really matter that much for now. You can always change it to the other one. Once you've made your decision, just close this window and you're good to go. So with our mouse click, we're going to select the cube, and you're gonna know it's selected because it's got an orange outline around it. If you've ever sat down on the computer computer before, then you understand that you can select multiple objects by just selecting one object, then holding shift and selecting another object, then both of those objects are going to be selected simultaneously. This is obvious. You can also select every object in the scene by pressing A, and you can deselect them either by clicking somewhere in an empty area or by double pressing A. The other objects which you can see in the scene here are this simple light and this camera, which we're not going to need for now, so we can also just delete those objects. Select the camera, shift select the lamp, and either press delete, or you can undo that with Ctrl Z and press X, delete. It's the same thing. Now here are some basic operations that you can perform on any object inside Blender. Select this cube, and you can press G to freely move this cube around your scene. G stands for grab, so you're basically grabbing this view and taking it somewhere else. Once you've decided where you want to place it, you can just click and the cube is going to stay there. Again, you can undo this with Ctrl Z, and then it's going to return to the original position. You can also press R to rotate this freely, and again you can rotate as much as you like, then click to confirm the rotation, and now the rotation of the cube has been changed. Finally, you can press S to scale this object. So once you press S, you can move your mouse away from the middle of the cube, or you can move it closer to the middle of the cube, and depending on that, your cube is either going to increase in size or decrease in size. Once you've decided on the size that you want, again just click and the size is going to be confirmed. Now these simple operations are known as transforms, and again the transforms are location, rotation, and scale, which are controlled by grabbing with G, rotating with R, and scaling with S. Now you can limit each transform so that it only occurs along a certain axis. For example, I don't want to freely move this cube somewhere over here. I want to only move it very accurately along this red line, which is the x-axis. To do that, I can just press G, and then while I'm freely moving this, I'll just press X to limit this to the x-axis, and now it's freely sliding along the x-axis. If you want to cancel this movement, you can just right click and it's going to return to its original position. You can again press G and press Y so that this only moves along the y-axis, or Z so that it only moves along the z-axis, which is up and down. The same way that you can limit the movement to any of the axes, you can press R and then press Z so that it only rotates around the z-axis, or X to rotate around the x-axis, or Y to rotate around the y-axis. Needless to say, the same applies for the final transform, which is scaling. So you can press S to scale, but you don't want to scale it in every direction. You only want to make it longer on the x-axis. So while you're scaling, just press X, and now it's going to become longer or shorter depending on how you move your mouse. Again, you can do this on any axis, and once you're happy with the length, just click to confirm, and now you just reshaped your cube. If you want to transform your stuff more accurately, you can type in numbers to tell Blender exactly how much you want to move or scale or rotate this object. For example, each of these squares on this grid pattern on the floor represents 1 meter. So if we move this cube with G along the x-axis, we can move it by exactly 1 meter, either by holding Control to make it snap, or by typing in a number while we are freely moving this, such as 5 or -5. You can even use decimals such as 1.5 to move this exactly between these two lines here. The same applies for rotating, but when you rotate, you can type in 45 to rotate this by 45 degrees. Or when you scale, you can double the size by pressing S and 2, and now the cube is going to have exactly twice its original dimensions. Likewise, you can scale this to 0.5, and then it's going to have half of its size. Those are just some very simple controls, which once again you have to get used to before you can start creating anything. So again, I invite you to spend a couple minutes playing around with this, and then we're going to dive into the next chapter where we're going to start modeling something. In case you messed something up and you don't know how to go back, you can always press Ctrl N. This is going to allow you to create a new file from scratch. Click on General. You probably don't want to save this, but you can save it if you want to. And then you're going to have a brand new file. You can start completely from the beginning again. Next, let's start doing a little bit of modeling. Now, when we're creating a model such as a vitamin bottle, we have to consider the basic shape of this object. And a vitamin bottle is usually shaped like a cylinder. So it's going to be a lot easier if instead of starting with a cube, we start with a cylinder. And here's how we can do that. You're going to select your default cube, delete it, and now with Shift A, you're going to be able to create a new object or add a new object into the scene. So press Shift A, and you're going to get this little menu which is called Add. You can add a whole bunch of different things here, but we're only going to use the Mesh menu. And here you have some basic shapes. In the middle of this menu, you're going to find cylinder, and if you click on that, a cylinder appears in the scene. It looks like we're already halfway there. There are supplement bottles which look like this, so you can probably just sell this to your client. Now, if before you added your cylinder, you accidentally clicked somewhere into the background like this, you will notice that this little red and white circle is going to be placed somewhere else. By default, it's placed in the middle of the world, but anywhere you click with your mouse button, this little cursor is going to snap there. This is called a 3D cursor, and this cursor is used for a very accurately controlled controlling things in your scene. We're not going to talk too much about it in this video, but we are going to use it a little bit. The most basic function of the 3D cursor is that when you add a new object with Shift A, such as a cube, it's going to appear exactly on that cursor. So if before you added your cylinder, your cursor was over here, then your cylinder is probably located somewhere up here. Now, just for the sake of simplicity, it's probably better if you have this exactly in the middle of your scene. So to do that, you can press Shift S. That's going to open up this little menu, and this is a menu for controlling the 3D cursor. This is very useful, so I invite you to explore this a little bit, but you don't have to do that for now. We're going to talk about that in another video. You're going to click on this button which says Cursor to World Origin, and this is going to snap the 3D cursor to the center of the world where these axes intersect. Additionally, you can also find this up here in the object menu. You will find a snap section where you can also find Cursor to World Origin. Now you can either add a new cylinder with Shift A and it's going to appear exactly there, and then you can delete this one with X or delete, or you can just snap this cylinder, which we already have from before, exactly onto the 3D cursor, which is also exactly in the middle of the world. You can do that by selecting this cylinder, then pressing Shift S and choosing selection the cursor up here. Now the cylinder is going to snap to the 3D cursor, and now it's exactly in the center of the world. Now here is how you can turn this cylinder into a very simple bottle. We're first going to enter side view so we get a better view of this object, and that's going to give us a little bit more control. To do that, you can use this little gizmo up here in the top right corner. For example, if you press on this little red circle which says X, your view is now going to be aligned perfectly with the X-axis, and you can see up here in the top left corner that it says right orthographic. This means that you're in right view, or that you're looking at this object from the right side. You can also use this green one to get the front view, or the blue one up here to get top view, and to exit any of these views, just use your middle mouse button to go back into regular view, and now you can click on any other of these circles over here. You also have some shortcuts for this on your number pad. This is what I like to use, but some of you don't have a number pad, so you're probably gonna use this. But for those of you that do have a number pad, you can press 7, 1, or 3 on the number pad to control your view. I'm going to press 1 on the number pad. That gives me front view, and from this perspective, this cylinder looks like a square. Now we're going to make this cylinder a little bit taller. To do that, we're going to select the cylinder, then press tab to enter edit mode, and you're going to notice that now your cylinder looks a bit different, and you also got some tools over here on the side. This is because we entered edit mode, which means we changed our workspace so that we can edit the mesh of the object. We can change the shape of the cylinder. Now we're focusing specifically on the cylinder, so if you have any other objects in the scene, you can't really work with them when you're in edit mode. You have to go back to object mode by pressing tab again, and now you can manipulate separate objects. But in edit mode, you can select vertices individually, you can shift select to get multiple vertices selected, and that way you can completely change the shape of the cylinder, and this is where most of our modeling experience is going to take place. Now in edit mode, the controls are exactly the same as in object mode, which means you can move with G, you can rotate with R, or you can scale with S. The selection tools are exactly the same. You can select everything with A. So for now, we're just going to go to front view, select everything with A, press S to scale, then Z to only scale on the Z axis, and we're going to type in 1.5 to make this bottle 50% taller. Now that we made the bottle a little bit taller, let's make the edges a little bit more round so that it looks more like a bottle. To do that, we're first going to switch to face select mode, so that instead of selecting individual vertices, we can select individual faces on this cylinder. We're going to select the top face, and then we're going to make this edge a little bit more round with our bevel tool. To do that, we're going to press Ctrl B because that's the shortcut for the bevel tool. And now watch what happens when you move your mouse. It's almost like you sanded down this edge to make it not so sharp. And this is a very important modeling tool that I personally use all the time. This is one of the most basic things which you have to be aware of. So remember this shortcut, Ctrl B, this is for beveling. Now before we click to confirm this, we can scroll up to add some more segments to make this a little bit more round and smooth. And then we're going to use our mouse to adjust how large we want this bevel to be. I want it to be approximately this large. I'm going to scroll up a couple more times to make this a little bit nicer. This is going to be the shoulder part of my bottle, and then we're going to be able to use this to create the neck, and that's where we're going to later have a hole where you put in the pills. Now if you want to do the same thing down here at the bottom, you can undo this with Ctrl Z, and then while you're in face select mode, you can use your middle mouse click to click and drag and to look at this bottle from below. Now while this face is still selected, hold down shift and right click on this face. Now both of these faces are selected, and now with Ctrl B we can bevel them simultaneously, and the bevel is going to be exactly the same on both of those faces. So we're going to make it approximately this wide, and that gives us the basic shape. So now we can start making the neck of this bottle. To do this, we're going to select this face at the top here, and now we're going to use another modeling tool which is called extrude. This is going to extend this face up here so it effectively turns into a cylinder, and that's going to create the neck. To do that, press E. E is the shortcut for extrude, and now when you move your mouse, this face is going to follow your mouse. We're going to bring it up to around here somewhere, and as you can see, this is obviously going to be the neck of the bottle. Now we want to create a hole here, and you might think that we're going to do that by deleting this face. There's something else we have to do before that. If we delete this face right away, which you can do by pressing S and clicking on faces, then we're just going to get a paper thin bottle, and this does not look very realistic at all. So we have to add a little bit of thickness to this bottle first. We're going to undo this with Ctrl Z, and now we're going to press I while this face is selected to move this face inwards a little bit while we still get some edges connecting it to the outside. This is going to allow us to create a lip, and I want that to be approximately this thick. Now with E, I can extrude this face inwards again. We're going to bring it down to around here somewhere, and now we can press X to delete faces. This inside part is probably not going to be visible anyway, so this is going to be good enough for us. Now that we have a very basic shape for this bottle, let's do something to make it a little bit nicer. To do that, we're going to use something called a modifier. Modifiers are just special functions which automatically change our object in a certain way. In this case, we're going to use something which is going to make our object more smooth, more round, and it's going to look more natural. Before we do that, make sure that you're not in edit mode anymore by pressing tab. Now you're in object mode, and now we're going to add a modifier. To add a modifier, we're going to go over here to the properties panel on the right side. You're going to find this blue little wrench which is called modifiers. This is going to switch to the modifiers tab. You're going to have a button here which says add modifier. Click on that, and now you're going to get a little add modifier menu where you have a couple of categories. We're going to hover over the generate category to get some more options here, and down here at the bottom of the menu you're going to find subdivision surface. Click on this and watch how your object changes immediately. As you can see, it became more smooth and a little bit more round. It's almost like you melted the object. In this little menu which just appeared because we added this modifier, we have some controls. By default, the levels viewport is set to 1, which means we're only subdividing this once. We're only doing one iteration. This is the lowest level of subdivision. If you increase this number like this, it's going to become even smoother, and that's probably going to be even better for us. We're going to leave this here for now, but notice how this lip does not look very realistic. It looks a little bit too round. It's not supposed to look that way, and here's how you can change that. Select this object and press tab to enter edit mode. Now we're going to enter edge select mode right here so that we're selecting individual edges and not faces or vertices. And now we're going to select these two circles at the top of the lip. Here's how you do that. You're going to hold down Alt, and then you're going to click on one of these edges that go around the bottle, and that's going to select the entire circle around the top. Now I also want to select the inner circle, so I'm going to hold down Shift to add to my selection, and then I'll hold down Alt so that I can select another edge loop, and then again I'll click on this inner edge loop, and now they're both going to be selected. If that was too fast for you, repeat the last couple of seconds and you're going to be alright. Now here's how you can tighten these corners up. We're going to press Ctrl B to create a bevel, and you're going to notice that as soon as we create a bevel, these edges become a lot sharper. This is because when we have edges which are very close together, the subdivision surface modifier is not going to be able to make this part very round. Again, you can scroll up or scroll down to control how many edges you're going to add here. It doesn't matter too much, but the more you add the better. Just don't go too far because it might make your scene a little bit slow and laggy. This is usually what happens if you have too much geometry. I'm only going to add a tiny bevel here like this. As you can see now, when we go to object mode, this looks a lot nicer. You can also control the shape around the neck of this bottle by entering edit mode and pressing Ctrl R. This is going to allow us to add what's called a loop cut. You're going to see this yellow line which allows you to choose where you want to create this loop cut. We're going to click around the neck of the bottle. Now we can slide this up and down. I'm going to slide mine downwards a little bit like this. Now this shape is a little bit tighter, and now that looks a little bit better when you go to object mode. Now our bottle is more or less finished, but before we start creating the cap, there's one thing that we still have to do. This is very important for any bottle. I've never seen a bottle which doesn't have a little ring below the cap, so let me show you how to add a little detail like that. You're going to enter edit mode, and we created a loop cut right here with Ctrl R, so we have some edges that we can use to create this ring. But we need to have a ring of faces here which we're going to be able to extrude outwards to create the ring. Right now we only have a loop of edges. So to turn this edge into two edges which are going to have a face between them, we're going to select this with Alt right click, then press Ctrl B to bevel this, and move your mouse very slowly to make this a little bit wider. And you're also going to scroll all the way down before you click so that you only have two edge loops. Now choose how thick you want this ring to be. I want mine to be approximately this thick. So once I have the right thickness, I'm going to click, and now we can turn this into a ring. To do that, we're going to press Alt E, and this is going to give us some more controls for extruding, which in some cases are better than just using E. In this case, we're going to click on extrude faces along normals, and this is going to extrude all the faces in the direction which they're facing. So as you move your mouse, this is either going to move outwards or inwards. Obviously we want this to go outwards like this, and now you can just click, and before you know it, you got a ring around the neck of your bottle. Now once again, this is currently a little bit too round, so we're also going to have to tighten this up a little bit. To do that, we're going to enter edit mode. With With double A, we're going to deselect everything, and now we only want to select the edges which have to be sharper. Unfortunately, we can't really see the edges on the inside here because we have a subdivision surface modifier. So we have this curved area here which is concealing these edges. To fix that, we're just going to go over here to the subdivision surface modifier and reduce the value from 2 to 0. This makes our geometry a little bit more visible for now, but we're going to bring this back in a second. Now go back to edge select mode by clicking up here, and now you're going to use Alt right click to select this inner edge loop, then hold Shift Alt and then right click on this edge. Also click on this edge while holding Shift Alt, and finally you're also going to select this edge loop down here. Now you have all these edge loops selected, and with Control B we're just going to bevel them. We're going to scroll up a couple of times to make this a little bit sharper. I want to have bevels here which are approximately like this, and now with Tab we're going to go back to object mode so we can see this object better, and in the subdivision surface modifier we're going to add back 2 levels, and as you can see now this bottle looks a little bit more realistic. Here's one more thing that we have to do before we start making the cap. Right now you can see the geometry of this object. It looks like there's a frame or a grid all over this object, which doesn't look very nice. So we're going to select this bottle in object mode, go up here to the object menu and find this option which is called Shade Smooth. When you click this, your object is just going to look a lot more smooth. Just like that, you made a simple bottle. Now let's move to the next section where we're going to make the cap. I recommend you take a little break if this was already a lot of information for you, because the intensity is going to be a little bit higher in the next section. Now before we continue, we have to consider the possibility that Blender might crash on us. To prevent that from causing us any trouble, we gotta save this file. To save this file, you can either press Ctrl S or go up here to File, Save As. That's going to create this big menu. You can name this anything you want. Find the folder where you want to save this and just click on Save As. After you've done this, you're going to make a habit out of pressing Ctrl S randomly all the time as often as possible. The worst thing that can happen is if you model for 20 minutes and then Blender crashes and you lost 20 minutes of progress. Now let's create a cap for this bottle. Now there are all kinds of bottle caps in existence, but we're going to create something relatively simple in this tutorial. So before we add an object which we're going to use to create the cap, let's decide where we're going to place that object by placing our 3D cursor. Let's enter edit mode with Tab, zoom in on the neck of this bottle, and now we're going to enter vertex select mode, deselect everything by clicking somewhere on the side, and now with Alt right click we're going to select one of the edge loops at the top of this neck here. Once we have this selected, we're going to press Shift S and we're going to click on cursor to selected. That's going to snap the 3D cursor to the average location of all of these vertices, which is exactly in the middle of this circle, which is exactly in the middle of the bottle. This is where we can add a new circle which we're going to use to create the cap. So with Tab, go to object mode. Now press Shift A, and in the mesh menu we're going to add a circle. This circle we're going to turn into a cap. Before you click anywhere, when you add this circle, you're going to get this menu down here which is called Add Circle. You can click on that to expand it, and here you can control the number of vertices that you have on this circle. By default this number is set to 32, but if you reduce this to something like 8, you're going to notice that your circle becomes an octagon. You can go even further to 6, now it's a hexagon, and this significantly affects the shape of the circle. In this case we're going to set the number to something like 64. Maybe we can even go higher than that by setting this to 96, because we're going to need lots of vertices to create those little ridges that are placed all around the cap of the bottle. So 96 will probably do. Now let's press Tab to enter edit mode, and we're going to scale this down so it's approximately as wide as the neck, and that's going to be something like this. Now while this geometry is selected, we're going to press F to fill this, and now we're going to get a face on the inside of this circle, and this also allows us to press E, and that's going to extrude the cap outwards and turn this into a cylinder. Decide how thick you want this to be. I want mine to be something like this, so I'm going to click right here. I'm looking at this cylinder now and I feel like we don't have enough edges here. I want to have more ridges, so I'm going to undo a couple of steps with Ctrl Z, and now I don't have the circle anymore because I undid that. So with Shift A, I'm going to add a new circle, and I'm going to set the number of vertices to 128. That's going to be a little bit better. Now again, go to edit mode, scale this down, fill it with F, and extrude it up until it's approximately this thick, and then just click to confirm this. Now here's what we're going to do. We're going to create these ridges, but we have to consider that there's going to be a thin area up here at the top, and also down here at the bottom, which is going to be perfectly smooth, and that's going to be the beginning and the end of this little ridge. So with Ctrl R, we're going to add a new loop cut right here. here, click once, then right click to make sure this is exactly in the middle of this cylinder, and this is going to help us designate an area for these ridges. Now with Control B, we're going to bevel this, scroll all the way down so that we only have 2 edge loops, and you're going to bring this very close to these edges, but make sure you don't go through so it clips through like this. You want to have approximately this much space between the inner area and the outer area like this. Now we can use this inner area to create these little ridges. To do that, we're going to enter face select mode, and while this area is still selected, we're going to perform a function which is going to deselect every other face here, so that every remaining face can be used to create a hole, and that's going to give us the look that we want. So go up here to the select menu. Again, make sure that you're in face select mode, and in the select menu you're going to find an option called checker deselect. Click on that, and before you know it, every other face has been deselected. Now we can just extrude these inwards, and we're going to have some holes here. To do that, we're going to go up here to this little menu which is called transform pivot point, and you're going to click on individual origins. That's going to allow us to perform a function on all these faces individually as opposed to together. For example, when we extrude this with E, all of these faces are going to be extruded along their individual normal line, and we're going to push these inwards a little bit like this. And now with S we can also scale this down. That's going to change the shape here a little bit, and as you can see, now we got some ridges around our bottle. Now looking back at it, I'm still not very happy with the number of vertices I have here. I don't think this looks detailed enough. I want to have a lot more ridges here. You already saw how I increased the number of vertices. I'm going to do that again. You don't have to do that, but if you want to, then just jump back to that section. It's going to be good practice for you to do this again anyway. If you don't really care, you just want to keep going, then just do that. As you can see, now I recreated this cap with some more vertices. This time I used 256 instead of 128. Now finally, before we finish, we're going to go up here to the top, and we're going to make this top surface a little bit nicer. To do that, we're going to select it, and make sure that you're in face select mode for this. We're going to extrude this out only slightly like this, and then with S we're going to scale it down. That's going to give us a nice round edge here. And now we finished the model for this cap. To improve the shading a little bit, we're just going to go up here to the object menu, and we're going to click on shade auto smooth. Now Blender is automatically going to detect which edges have to have smooth shading and which edges have to have sharp shading. We can also add another loop cut up here with Control R, and if we bring that close to this other edge, it's going to control the shading a little bit, but it's up to you if you want to do that. Your model is more or less good to go. All you're gonna have to do now is add some materials, put a sticker on here, and you're going to be able to make some advertising content for a client. Now if you want me to make another video where I teach you this from scratch for complete beginners, then let me know in the comments and we can continue moving in this direction. And you have to admit that this was one of the most efficient learning experiences you ever had in your life. It's really not that hard to learn how to use Blender well enough to make a little bit of money. If you think texturing and animating is more complicated than this, it's really not. Usually modeling is the most difficult part. So if you could follow with this, you're definitely going to be able to follow the texturing and animation tutorials if you ask me to make some. If you haven't already, then like the damn video and subscribe to the channel. I've been posting videos every single day for the past month. And if you're serious about learning Blender, then connect with me on Instagram, because this is where I connect with my audience. I am soon going to make an announcement for something crazy. We're going to take Blender tutorials and courses to a whole new level which has never been seen before. So let me know what you want to see next, and I'll see you in the next one.